Hey, welcome back to the channel everybody, and it's a sad day here at my house. I got rid of my beloved X-T4. Also, what do you think of this? Right here. I'm sorry if she's a little bit distracting. I didn't realize she was actually in the frame, but I'm gonna let her sleep while I take this video anyway. Alright, so I watched the announcement for the X-T5 a few weeks ago when it came out. I didn't really think too much of it. I thought that it was a pretty cool camera and it was great for its price point and size. But I wasn't really sure whether I was going to replace my X-T4 with this camera until yesterday when my friend Peter texted me and said, hey man, Used Photo Pro is going to be in our parking lot taking in used gear for the entire weekend, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And I thought, oh, I wonder if they'll give me a good deal for my X-T4, just out of curiosity. And they did. And there was a little bit of I don't know, some confusion on whether or not a lot of X-T5s would get delivered online, and I think there was like some issues in one of the Discord groups I'm in. There was some issues with like B&H and whether or not they had accurate information on whether they got their deliveries or not. But anyway, Paul's Photo in Torrance had plenty, and I went down there to check one out, and turns out Used Photo Pro actually gave me a pretty good deal for my X-T4. So guess what? I brought home an X-T5. And just a quick side story, Used Photo Pro is actually a subsidiary of a company called Roberts Photo in Indianapolis, Indiana, which is where I used to live. And I actually have spent quite a bit of time and money in Roberts. And I didn't realize that it was the same Used Photo Pro. But it was great. I was able to send some of my gear back to Indiana, and they were able to give me some of their money in exchange for that. And it's actually kind of a cool organization. You should check them out, usephotoPro.com. They're kind of sort of like becoming like a KEH type of thing, but it's based here in the US and out of Indianapolis. And I really love Roberts Photo. Everyone over there was always really good to me. So if you're thinking about buying some used gear, I highly recommend you check them out. So I'm shooting this on the X-H2S. I love the X-H2S. When it came out, I was super excited about it. It was a camera that had all my answers personally for all my needs, and I contemplated getting another one, and I still am. However, I was able to get a good deal for the X-T4. The X-T5 is actually a pretty good price, and I decided to give it a go for a multitude of different reasons. I wanted something a little bit light and smaller to do street photography with. Something that was a little more discreet, something I could actually put the 16 on like this and be sort of a small compact package. Not quite X100V status, but you know, it's small enough that I can do stuff like that. And still got the hot shoe so I can mount my action cam, do some first person stuff, and it really enabled me to use a shorter focal length, just take one lens with me and maybe a battery in my pocket, action cam on top, and I can go out and I can still vlog, even though I can't really see the screen, because it's just this three-way tilt, which I'll get to in a second. It does have F-Log2, it does do 6.2K, and it does do 4K HQ, so it shouldn't be too hard to match to XH2 footage should I need to use both of them for one project, say as a B cam. And then the other thing was, because it's 40 megapixels, and I'm a little bit skeptical because I personally have never really liked super high resolution. The highest resolution I ever had prior to this was 30 in my Canon EOS R, and I didn't really care for it versus my R6. The lower pixel density and larger pixels just was easier for me to edit, especially if I was removing things like telephone poles and things like that. They were just a little bit easier because the sampling brush tool could sample more colors. It would go around the pixel and it was able to sort of take in data from around it, and there was multitude of colors in one pixel, so it was easier to make things go invisible in my opinion. And it was also easier to, if you have an anti-aliasing filter, sort of enhance the sharpness or even enhance the photo through like Topaz Labs Gigapixel AI, or in Lightroom by doing right click and enhance to blow it up, you know, sort of using the AI algorithms to make the resolution higher. It was a little bit easier to do for the lower resolution. But this kind of caught my eye because when I'm doing the street photography thing, if I want to use just one single prime lens like the 16, or maybe something a little bit bigger, perhaps an 18, 23, even a 33, I can still capture a lot of detail if I'm close, but if I'm not super close, I can still overcrop almost half the frame and still have 26 megapixels like I do in the X-H2S, like I did in the X-T4, so I can still kind of, you know, with just one lens, even though I don't really like cropping, with just one lens I should be able to get a pretty good photo and still keep my, you know, discrete sort of one lens, one camera, extra battery in my pocket sort of profile. And I can continue to do first person videos as well as, you know, intros and outros vlog style with the camera itself while I leave the X-H2S here safely at home. I am a big fan of having two cameras if you can swing it. If you can't, don't worry about it. But I am a big fan in case something happens to one of them, then you have something to shoot on until your insurance comes through or whatever you're doing to protect your gear comes through for you. But, you know, I very seldomly take both cameras at the same time for that reason. Now, if there's a job that calls for two, I'll take two. I'll be very careful. I put them in cases. I'll put them in the seat next to me so I can, you know, see them and things like that, just to make sure that nothing's going to happen to both of them at the same time, because, you know, things happen. Stories are out there. Fro knows photo has a lot of stories. He's reported on a lot of things like that. So I will always leave one at home if I can get away with using just one. Now, if you notice, for most of my vlogs, I don't really need an X-H2S. However, I do love it. It is a true hybrid camera, and it does enable me to take some really cool B-roll, highly detailed of the area, but I'm not always doing that. So sometimes I'm just going to places and saying, hey, here's where I went, here's what my camera settings are, here's the example photos, and I think this will allow me to get away with that. I can still vlog and say, hey, here I am, this is what I'm doing. I can still put it in F-Log too, so all the presets I've been working on for the X-H2S will work, and I can sort of color match them. It should look very similar to the X-H2S if you were to put it in H.265 mode at 360 megabits per second. That's kind of what you're going to get out of this in 4K HQ. So it does have a slight crop, but it's, whatever. I mean, this is small enough. When I'm vlogging, I can hold it way out here. It doesn't really bother me too much, especially since I'm not going to be doing a whole lot of video outside of that. It'll still enable me to do some B-roll for the vlog as well, and then have some extra crispy, higher resolution photos than I normally do. So far, the photos I've taken with it look really good. They aren't, I'll show you a couple. They aren't really great. These are just photos that I got right after I got the camera. I am going to go out, however, in a few minutes and actually go take the dog for a hike, and I'm going to take some pictures of the skyline. I'm going to test out pixel shift, and I'm going to test out doing a manual panorama to see what the quality is like, and I'll jump into Lightroom when it comes to that, and I'll show you a few of those and really see whether pixel shift is something worth it or not. It's probably good for studio stuff, but I'm not really sure, even on a tripod, for landscape stuff. There's just a lot of vibrations in the ground, as well as, you know, wind and things like that, that can really throw the pixel shift off because it is very sensitive. So we'll see. But then if I put, you know, several frames of the 40 megapixel to work in Lightroom as a square panorama, then we might have an extra large amount of detail without having to use pixel shift. That will look great. And like I said earlier, for the street stuff, I think it makes a lot of sense. So I'm going to work with these images for the next couple of weeks and really see if I can get used to using this camera or not. And if I do, if I like it, I'll keep it. If not, I may return it or sell it and then put the money towards another X-H2S, because the X-H2S really does serve all my needs in one camera, and I can just take it with me and do a little bit of everything. And this one, I don't want to say it's crippled, but if I decided to do first-person street photography, a small B-roll demonstration of the area I'm in, focusing specifically on video for 2 or 3 minutes of different interesting things in the area, as well as vlogging, I would probably take the X-H2S just because the video features are a little bit better, and the tried and true 26.1 megapixel resolution and sensor out of the camera are just fantastic. Anyway, I haven't had any issues with the resolution or the sharpness or anything like that. So this is kind of like a couple of week experiment to see whether this is going to be able to be my daily driver or not. Now, a couple of things I do want to comment on, and I hope Fuji doesn't blacklist me for this, but in my experience, I have had not really issues. It's not really been a big deal, but a lot of their products are very inconsistent. So, for example, this is a 16mm lens on this camera, and the aperture ring is very, I mean, very easy to turn, and it's always been that way ever since I got it. And then of course we have the manual focus clutch, very easy to spin. On this camera, or on this lens, the 16-55 is the complete opposite. If I turn this aperture ring, it is very stiff. It lets you know when you turn it. It lets you know when it clicks. I don't know if it has something to do with the size difference, but this one doesn't click very loud. It moves very easily. It's hard if you have it up to your eye, unless you're looking at the screen. It's kind of hard to know, oh, did I just move it enough to be at f4? No, I'm at f6 or 7.1. It's not a big deal, but my telephoto, same way. The aperture ring is very loose, the zoom ring is very stiff, the focus ring is very loose, and then on the 16-55, aperture ring stiff, zoom ring is very loose, and then the focus ring is very stiff. There are always some little inconsistencies from one to the other. And as far as this goes, the X-T4 felt like it had a better build quality. The X-H2S feels like it has a better build quality as well. At least the top part of the camera. That's really all that feels somewhat a little bit cheaper to me than it used to. So if you take a look at this, from the silver part down, this rubber grippy stuff feels really nice. The buttons and everything on the back, the shutter dials and the push buttons that are associated with them feel nice. Nothing really feels that different until you get to the top dials and the sub command dials here. So this one, I don't know if you can hear it. I'll put it here next to my microphone. It just sounds really hollow, and it feels really hollow to move it. And the same with the ISO dial. It just feels hollow and toy-like. My X-T4 did not feel that way, so I don't know if it's just product inconsistency. Now if you switch over to this one, the movie, listen to it. It's very quiet. It almost feels like there's a rubber damper for when I switch it. However, the shutter speed, same thing, watch. Really hollow, kind of cheap feeling. But then the exposure compensation wheel is almost perfect. If you can hear that. It's really quiet, but it lets you know when you've turned it. You can feel it, you know exactly how many stops you've moved. It feels dampened a little bit. It actually feels really good. I like it. So yeah, the top, it's not a big deal. As long as they work, it's fine. And I don't really use the top dials ever. Yeah, sometimes I'll switch for video. I'll switch to auto ISO, back and forth like that. But that's really the only time I use it. And sometimes I may put the aperture in automatic now, just because when I'm vlogging with this camera, I prefer to be wide open if I can, and then just adjust the exposure with an ND filter. But since I can't see the screen to adjust my exposure for video, I'm just going to put it in shutter priority and let it try and figure it out automatically. For vlog, it's not a big deal because they're not cinematic masterpieces. They don't need to be perfect, so it's not really that big of a deal to me. But anyway, yeah, other than that, I don't really use these that much, especially, a lot of people really like the shutter dial, but sometimes I move it too fast and I go to a shutter speed that I don't want. Sometimes, it's just like, so if I turn this on, you can see that I'm at 1/60th. There is a 1/60th on the dial, but I can also go down to 1/50th, 1/40th, and neither of those are present up here. So having more options with the shutter speed, I tend to use it a little bit more. It's also a little bit faster, like that, so I don't miss the moment rather than pushing this or leaving that up and then trying to go and memorize which. Anyway, some people love it. I prefer not to use any of them. I use the command dials. I do like the way it makes the camera look, but I don't think that they're necessary, and I actually have a better time using the dials because I can dial things in a little bit faster, less movements involved. But anyway, that was just my spiel on the build quality. It does feel like a nice heavy camera. However, the top dials feel a little bit different than the X-T4. They felt better on the X-T4. I'm not gonna lie. Now, if somebody else out there has an all black one, my X-T4 was all black, which is why I went silver with this one. Maybe they're a little bit different. I don't know why the color would make a difference, but maybe it's just some slight inconsistencies in the manufacturing process. Just something to be aware of if having something that feels really super high quality all the time is something that you want, or if it just works, then that's fine too. For me, it doesn't matter, but I just wanted to comment on it because these dials, they do not feel as good as my X-T4, nor do they feel as good as the single PASM dial on the XH2S. One last thing I want to comment on is the screen. This was a love-hate relationship with a lot of people. A lot of people love the flippy outie screen. A lot of people hate it. They think that it's, you know, means it's a video camera now, and they don't want video in their photo bodies. I personally don't care. A screen's a screen. If it works and I can see out of it, that's all I need. I'm not gonna. To me, it's kind of like arguing about which way the toilet paper should go on. It doesn't matter. As long as the toilet paper works to wipe your butt, I don't really care which direction it's on there. I got bigger and better things to worry about, so I don't really care about the toilet paper, nor do I care about the screen. Now, if you ask me which I prefer, I would prefer the flippy outie screen, even for photography, just because the angle on this is not enough. There are certain situations, especially in landscape photography, like this photo here of the Hollywood sign, where you are allowed to hang your tripod over the fence to get that shot, but you are not allowed to put body parts over the fence, so you can't hold it there. You have to use a tripod or something, and this just doesn't help me. If I have it all the way up on an extended tripod looking down over, I can't, it's not, my only complaint is really that it should move further down, at least 90 degrees flush with the bottom of the camera in all four directions. That would be really helpful. Same with this tilt. I mean, it's helpful for portraits maybe like this, but I mean, does it really make that much of a difference to me? No, not really. And then this, yeah, whatever, it works. And for most of the photography that I do, I use the EVF more than the screen, but for certain situations, the only workaround for me to see what's my camera is pointed at, such as going over a fence like this, when I can't see the screen, my only workaround is to use a phone app, which I don't really feel too supportive of any manufacturer's phone app at this point. I just really feel like they're not that good. But anyway, yeah, if it moved 90 degrees that way, and it doesn't move this way at all, I mean, there's nothing you can do, and it does move 90 degrees this way, but I wish that it would do it this way as well. That, I would think, would be a little bit more helpful for me, especially for photography. There are some times where I don't have the widest lens with me and I have to hold the camera like this up against my chest or up against a wall or something, and I can't see. So that's where I use the flip out to kind of see what's going on. I don't know. I found the flip out more advantageous for both photo and video, and I found this to be pretty limiting at times. So some people, it doesn't make a difference. To me, it's just kind of like whatever. As long as I can see there, that's really all that matters. But I would prefer flippy if I had the choice. Okay, so now I'm going to head over to Griffith Park and I'm going to walk around with the dog, and I'm going to test out some photos. I'll throw them in the vlog. I will also test out pixel shift versus panorama, and I will give you some thoughts over how it works. Really, I won't come to too many conclusions because I'll do that in a couple weeks, comparing the photos out of the XH2S versus the photos out of the X-T5, and really sort of get into a more in-depth, because I've had the camera less than 24 hours, so I really can't comment too much of it yet. But I am going to go right now to Griffith Park. We're going to go out to the helipad, nice city views. And it's a little bit bright today, so light might be a little bit harsh. That's my fault for not getting up early enough. So anyway, I'm going to go out there, test out some pixel shift, test out some landscapes and resolution comparisons just through editing, and I will jump into Lightroom and I will show you some of that stuff, and we'll go from there.